This program is supported by SMC Global Power, Bank of Commerce, an affiliate of San Miguel Corporation. We think customers. RJK Services Manpower Agency Corporation, Stark Molecular Laboratory, North Luzon Express Terminal.
Unrest followed the funeral procession of a Palestinian who died of wounds he suffered during clashes with Israeli police.
Israeli forces fired tear gas and rubber bullets at Palestinians throwing stones in Jerusalem's Old City. More details on this later in the news. Good evening. I'm CJ Hirro.
And I am Nina Ricci, Alagao, Flores. This is Mata ng Agila International. And now for the headlines. Petitioners bring fight versus Marcos candidacy to Supreme Court. Marcos camp appeals to critics to respect the will of the people. Philippines Department of Health confirms local transmission of Omicron subvariant BA2.12.1. Russian President Vladimir Putin warned Sweden and Finland that joining NATO would be a mistake. Beijing students protest COVID-19 curbs on campus. And 75th Cannes Film Festival ready to party as COVID-19 rules end. Presumptive President Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr. asked former Labor Secretary Benny Laguesma and Susan Toots Ople to be part of his administration. Spokesperson Attorney Vic Rodriguez confirmed on a press briefing that Marcos had talked to Laguesma and Ople before leaving the country for Australia. Laguesma was asked to lead the Department of Labor and Employment, while Ople was offered to be the head of the Department of Migrant Workers. Rodriguez said Laguesma and Ople have yet to accept the offer as they want to first consult their families and friends, among others.
Sila naman ay very warm yung pagtanggap. They were honored. But yun nga, when you're doing so well in the private sector and you're doing so well with your private practice, medyo challenging din na maimbita mo sa pamahalaan dahil sakripisyo yan. And humihingi lang sila ng kaunting panahon nang makonsulta at makausap yung kanilang mga mahal sa buhay, siguro yung ilang kaibigan at yung mga taong kanilang pinaniniwalaan at pinakikinggan at hihingi ng payo.
Earlier, Marcos announced that presumptive Vice President Sara Duterte and former Metropolitan Manila Development Authority Chairman Benher Abalos have accepted the posts to lead the Department of Education and the Department of Interior and Local Government, respectively.
More than 55 million out of the 67 million registered voters participated in the recently concluded May 9 national and local elections. The number is the highest voter turnout in the history of the country. Sitting as the National Board of Canvassers, COMELEC has already received the canvass report from Lanao del Sur, the only report needed by the poll body to confirm the ranking of the winning senatorial candidates. But since it's just a canvass report, they did not include it in the counting of the NBOC. They still need to await the result of the special election set on 12 barangays in Tubaran, Lanao del Sur. Meanwhile, the poll body sent invites to the 12 winning senators for tomorrow's proclamation. They are Robin Padilla, Loren Legarda, Rafi Tulfo, Sherwin Gatchalian, Chiz Escudero, Mark Villar, Alan Peter Cayetano, Migs Zubiri, Joel Villanueva, JV Ejercito, Risa Ontiveros, and Jinggoy Estrada. For the first time, the poll body invited President Rodrigo Duterte, Vice President Leni Robredo, Senate President Vicente Soto III, House Speaker Lord Alan Velasco, and Chief Justice Alexander Gesmundo to witness the proclamation. COMELEC Commissioner George Garcia said the move intends to show courtesy and signify a peaceful transition of power. The COMELEC ensures tight security during the proclamation ceremony.
Presumptive Vice President Sara Duterte may take her oath on June 19 as she wishes, when Congress formally proclaims her as the winning candidate in the vice presidential race. COMELEC Commissioner George Garcia said the oath-taking may take place earlier, but the assumption of office will take effect at 12:01 in the afternoon of June 30. In a statement Monday, Duterte said she had already penned the date of her oath-taking on June 19 to be witnessed by her fellow Davaoeños in honor of them. She also intends to witness the oath-taking of presumptive President Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos on June 30. Sitting as the National Board of Canvassers, the Senate and House of Representatives will jointly convene next week to canvass the votes for President and Vice President.
Attorney Vic Rodriguez confirmed that Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison extended his congratulations to presumptive President Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr. this morning.
Early this morning, I think, Philippine time, nakapag-usap na rin ang pinuno ng
At a press briefing, Rodriguez said Morrison will continue to support the succeeding administration of Marcos Jr.
This morning, I think, Philippine time, nakapag-usap na rin ang pinuno ng bansang Australia, His Excellency Prime Minister Morrison, at ang ating President-elect Bongbong Marcos, kung saan ay nagpahatid ng congratulatory message ang pinuno ng bansang Australia dahil sa integridad na naganap sa ating halalan nung nakaraang Lunes, at kanya ring ipinahatid ang kanyang pagbati sa sambayan ng Pilipino dahil payapa nating nairaos ang pinakademokratikong uri ng pamimili ng leader. And of course, he affirmed yung kanilang gobyernong patuloy na mainit at close interaction at pakikipag-ugnayan sa pamahalaan ng Republika ng Pilipinas, at pagbati na rin sa malinaw at malinis na tagumpay ni President-elect Bongbong.
Rodriguez added that it was Australia's Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade that coordinated with the Philippine authorities on security arrangements for Marcos's trip with his whole family. The private trip was confirmed by the Philippine ambassador to Australia, Her Excellency Helen de la Vega. Rodriguez also reprimanded the crowd who had gathered outside in central Melbourne, saying that presumptive President Marcos Jr. is unwelcome in Australia.
Hindi ugali ng Pilipino hiyain at pahiyain ang kapwa niya Pilipino sa isang bansa na hindi naman Pilipinas. I think the best authority or person to say whether he is welcome or not are the Australian government, not fellow Filipino na nandoon lang dahil punong-puno ng puot at pait ang puso. Uulitin ko, wala sa kaugalian nating mga Pilipino ang hiyain ang kapwa mo Pilipino sa ibang bansa. Ang Pilipino ay kilala na nagtutulungan. Mababait tayo. Huwag niyo hong gawin yan sa ibang bansa, sa ibang bayan. Wala ho kayong ibang agenda kundi palaganapin ang inyong puot at pait sa inyong puso. Hindi po ganyan ang Pilipino.
Rodriguez maintained that Marcos Jr. and his family will be in Australia for a much-needed 3 days of rest and vacation before letting go of their life as private citizens and working selflessly for the government.
A petition to cancel the certificate of candidacy of presumptive President Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr. was elevated to the Supreme Court. Likewise, the petitioners Christian Buenafe, Fides Lim, Maria Edelisa Hernandez, Celia Lagman Sevilla, Roland Vibal, and Josephine Lascano asked the Supreme Court to issue a temporary restraining order or TRO and joining in restraining the Senate and House of Representatives from canvassing the votes cast for Marcos and proclaiming him as president should he win. In their petition, represented by attorney Theodore Te, the petitioners said a candidate's putative election victory cannot subsequently cure his ineligibility, as it noted that elections are more than just a numbers game, such that an election victory cannot bypass election eligibility requirements. An earlier petition was filed before the Commission on Elections, but was junked by the COMELEC division and subsequently upheld by the COMELEC en banc. The petitioners argued that Marcos committed a crime of moral turpitude and perjury for false representation when he filed the certificate of candidacy on his eligibility to run for president. They brought up his tax conviction after he failed to file his income tax returns from 1982 to 1985 when he was governor and vice governor of Ilocos Norte.
The camp of presumptive President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. appealed for petitioners to respect the will of the people. Attorney Vic Rodriguez made the appeal as opposition to Marcos's candidacy elevated their petition before the Supreme Court. The group also asked the High Court to stop the canvassing of votes for Marcos as Congress is set to convene as the National Board of Canvassers on May 24. The Marcos camp has yet to receive the official copy of the petition from the Supreme Court. However, Rodriguez said the matter was already junked unanimously by the Commission on Elections or COMELEC en banc. Rodriguez said the people have spoken after more than 31 million Filipinos voted for Marcos and his running mate, presumptive Vice President Sara Duterte.
These cases have been resolved unanimously by the Commission on Election on the division level, as well as the Commission on Election on en banc. And these cases have been dismissed, and the decision was unanimous. I appeal to those who keep on pursuing this divisiveness. The people have spoken, the Filipino people have spoken, and an overwhelming majority has voted President-elect Bongbong Marcos and Vice President-elect Inday Sara Duterte into office as President and Vice President. And I appeal to you, instead of pushing for your agenda of animosity, tulungan niyo lang na humuna kami na pagtuunan at gamitin natin ang ating limitadong oras araw-araw. We are all limited to 24 hours in a day. Allow us to be more productive and learn to respect the will of the Filipino people.
The Philippine Senate has received 141 out of 173 certificates of canvass. These COCs detail the votes cast for presidential and vice presidential candidates in the just concluded 2022 elections. According to the latest update from the Senate media, the number corresponds to 81.50% of COCs expected to be delivered to the upper chamber. The newest batch of COCs that arrived at the Senate building includes those from Manila, Siquijor, Bohol, Leyte, Davao City, Tawi-Tawi, Zamboanga del Sur, and 63 barangays of the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao. The COCs from Japan, Guam, Kuwait, and Oman were also received by the Senate. The Senate began accepting ballot boxes containing the COCs and the election returns, or ERs, a day after the May 9 national and local elections. The COCs and the ERs will be transferred to the House of Representatives before May 24. This is also the day both the Senate and the House are expected to convene in a joint session and sit as the National Board of Canvassers. They will then tally the votes cast for the presidential and the vice presidential elections.
Department of Interior and Local Government, or DILG, Undersecretary Epimako Densing III called on the public to report campaign materials that are still posted as the deadline for their removal has already passed. At the Laging Handa public hearing, Densing said campaign materials have already been removed in areas he recently visited. However, if the public see that local governments have yet to remove the campaign materials in their areas, they can report them and the DILG will have them visited. On May 11, DILG Secretary Eduardo Año urged LGUs and candidates in the May 9 elections to dispose of any campaign materials in their areas within 3 days. Densing said a notice from DILG will be received by LGUs that fail to remove all campaign materials within the said time frame. However, he cited an order from the Supreme Court that they cannot order the removal of campaign materials in private properties. As of now, the Metropolitan Manila Development Authority, or MMDA, through its operation Baklas, has collected 98 tons or 28 truckloads of campaign materials.
Meanwhile, the Department of Health, or DOH, confirms there is already a local transmission of the Omicron subvariant BA.2 or BA.2.12.1 in the Philippines. 3 new cases of this subvariant have just been reported in the Western Visayas region, bringing the total to 17 cases. Madeline Villar Moratillo has the story.
Philippine health authorities detected a local transmission of Omicron subvariant BA.2.12.1. However, Health Undersecretary Maria Rosario Vergara clarified that there is no community transmission of the said variant yet.
Meron na pong local transmission nitong subvariant ng Omicron na ito sa ating bansa. Nangangahulugan po na ang mga kaso na na-detect natin ay wala na pong kaugnayan sa mga kaso na nagmula sa labas ng bansa, ngunit makikita pa rin po ang linkages ng mga detected cases.
Vergara said 3 cases of the subvariant were detected in the Western Visayas region. At a news briefing, the health official said one of the 3 is a fully vaccinated, returning overseas Filipino from the United States, while the remaining 2 are local cases. One of the 2 local cases involves a fully vaccinated individual, while the other is being verified. Currently, the country has detected 17 BA.2.12 cases, 2 from the National Capital Region, 12 from Puerto Princesa, and 3 from Western Visayas. The Department of Health calls on the public not to panic, despite its confirmation of the subvariant's local transmission.
Hindi kailangan magpanik, hindi kailangan mangamba, basta tayo alam natin that we are aware, that we are equipped. Pag sinabi nating equipped po tayo, ibig sabihin, meron tayong tamang impormasyon kung ano ang dapat nating gawin. Alam natin kung paano tayo mag-ingat by always wearing our mask.
Vergara said BA.2.12.1 is known to be more contagious than the original Omicron variant, so vaccination remains to be the best protection for everyone. The health official also assured that the local transmission of BA.2.12.1 will not immediately result in a surge of COVID-19 cases in the country. In its latest monitoring, the DOH said COVID-19 infections in the country continue to dwindle with an average of 157 confirmed cases daily. This is Madeline Villar Moratillo reporting for Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
Coming up, Putin warns Finland and Sweden on joining NATO as it strikes Ukraine. In Indonesia, over a dozen killed as tourist bus hits billboard. And in a rare act, Beijing students protest COVID-19 curbs on campus. All these and more when Mata ng Agila International returns.
This Ilan po to? Magli po, masuyo. Ilan ba to, sir? Masuyo pa sukli.
Tol, anong ginagawa mo, ha? Ano mo ginawa to? Ha? Ay, may pulis tayo dyan, eh. Anong pulis dyan? Ginawa mo akin to, eh.
Order!
Magkano, kuya? Te! Ilan deliver? Bigay mo lang sa kanya. Bigay mo lang, lalabas yan.
Eh wala ko alam dyan, kuya. Wala kami ng order. O pwede kong bayaran, kaya lang problema. Ayan na nga, bawas na siya. Alam ka naman bayaran ko to.
Ay, December Avenue. Nandito rin na.
December Avenue.
Kuya, pahihilo na siya. Nahihilo siya.
Patulogin yung ate.
Oh no! It's Biro only! Oh no! It's Biro Sunday!
We are open for business, giving MSMEs the latest market trends and business opportunities. Open for business, only on Net 25. We are open for business, giving MSMEs the latest market trends and business opportunities. Open for business, only on Net 25. We are open for business, giving MSMEs the
You're still watching Mata ng Agila International. Sweden has decided to join Finland and apply for membership in NATO. Swedish Prime Minister Magdalena Andersson made the announcement yesterday. Joining NATO reverses nearly 2 centuries of neutrality for the Scandinavian country. Andersson says her country is leaving one era and beginning another. 6 of 8 parties in the Swedish parliament are in favor of the membership. Public support has also risen dramatically to around 50%, with about 20% against. Sweden and Finland will submit their applications jointly this week, and both expect it will not take more than a year for them to be approved.
President Vladimir Putin said Sweden and Finland joining NATO would be no threat to Russia. Nevertheless, he warned the Western alliance that moving troops or weapons into the Nordic neighbors would provoke a response. Maricar Velasco has the story.
With Moscow pressing its assault in eastern border regions of Ukraine nearly 3 months into its invasion, Helsinki and Stockholm are poised to give up decades of military non-alignment over fears they could be next. Russian President Vladimir Putin said the move poses no direct threat for them, but the expansion of military infrastructure to these territories will certainly provoke their response.
Североатлантического альянса. Да, это проблема, которая создается, на мой взгляд, совершенно искусственно, поскольку делается это в интересах внешнеполитических интересах Соединенных Штатов. Вообще НАТО используется как инструмент внешней политики, по сути, одной страны.
Swedish Prime Minister Magdalena Andersson confirmed her country would apply to join NATO a day after Finland, which shares a 1,300-kilometer border with Russia, said the same.
Så det bästa för Sveriges säkerhet och svenska folkets säkerhet är därför att vi går med i NATO och att vi gör det tillsammans med Finland. Och det här är ju verkligen ett historiskt och omvälvande skifte för vårt land. Vi lämnar en era och vi går in i en annan. Men vi kan gå in i den nya tiden med tillförsikt.
The Russian leader's more moderate reaction marked a contrast with comments on Monday from Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov, who called the expansion a grave mistake with far-reaching consequences. The move is not a done deal in any case, with Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan confirming his country's intention to block the applications, accusing Finland and Sweden of harboring terror groups, including outlawed Kurdish militants.
Pazartesi günü Türkiye'ye geleceklermiş. Ya bizi ikna etmeye mi gelecekler? Kusura bakmasınlar. Yorulmasınlar. Her şeyden önce Türkiye'ye yaptırım uygulayanların bu süreç içerisinde bir güvenlik örgütü olan NATO'ya girmelerine biz evet demeyiz.
Sweden and Finland have failed to respond positively to Turkey's 33 extradition request over the past 5 years, Justice Ministry sources told the official Anadolu news agency on Monday. Any membership bid must be unanimously approved by NATO's 30 nations. But U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken voiced confidence Sunday that Sweden and Finland would join NATO despite Turkey's opposition. Turkish Foreign Minister Mevlut Cavusoglu will meet Blinken in Washington on Wednesday, where Ankara's objections are expected to figure high on the agenda. Maricar Velasco reporting for Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
The Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or ASEAN, and the U.S. claimed that the code of conduct being hammered out by China and the regional bloc in the disputed South China Sea must comply with international law. The ASEAN and the U.S. also emphasized the importance of the full and effective implementation of the 2002 Declaration on the Conduct of Parties, or DOC, in the South China Sea in its entirety. China was accused of violating the DOC for transforming several reefs or isles disputed by other claimants into artificial islands. China and the ASEAN settled for a mere declaration in 2002 that calls on claimants to stop new occupation and exercise restraint in the South China Sea. But the non-binding nature and lack of provision of the DOC to sanction misbehaving claimants renders the accord useless against aggression, in this case, China's alleged violations. Citing the strategic importance of UNCLOS, or the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, the ASEAN and U.S. said the convention sets out the legal framework within which all activities in the oceans and seas must be carried out. UNCLOS is an international treaty signed by 160 states, including the Philippines and China. It allows coastal nations the right to explore, manage, and exploit resources within 200 nautical miles from their shores. China, which considers the sea disputes a purely Asian issue, is opposed to any foreign intervention, especially from the U.S. But although the U.S. is not party to the sea disputes, it has declared that it is in its national interest to ensure freedom of navigation and overflight in the contested waters in the South China Sea.
The Philippine Coast Guard, or PCG, successfully placed 5 buoys in the West Philippine Sea to guide ships and fishermen navigating the country's exclusive economic zone. 1 marker was placed each near Lawak Island, Licas Island, and Parola Island, while 2 buoys were placed near Pag-asa Island. The buoys were equipped with modern marine aids, 2 navigation lanterns, specialized mooring systems, and a remote monitoring system that uses satellite technology to transmit data to the PCG national headquarters. According to PCG Commandant Admiral Artemio Abu, there was no tension in the area during the activity, even if the China Coast Guard was monitoring. The PCG will also hold arrival honors tomorrow for the Coast Guard Task Force that placed the 5 buoys successfully in the West Philippine Sea. ABU added to test the ability of the Coast Guards of the Philippines, Indonesia, and Japan in addressing oil spills. The PCG ships will participate in the Regional Marine Pollution Exercise 2022 in Indonesia on May 22 to 29. The PCG's newest and largest multi-response vessel, BRP Teresa Magbanwa, as well as BRP's Gabriela Silang, Malapascua, and Cape Engaño will take part in Marpolex 2022.
In Iraq, yet another sandstorm has shut down airports, schools, and universities and has sent at least 2,000 people to the hospital. A thick cloud of dust enveloped the capital city of Baghdad in an orange glow. Visibility was reduced to just 300 meters, prompting authorities to close airspace and halt flights. Authorities in 7 of Iraq's 18 provinces, including Baghdad, also ordered government offices to shut. This is the 8th storm since the middle of April. The last storm left 1 person dead and 5,000 others hospitalized because they had trouble breathing. Iraq has been battered by soil degradation, intense droughts, and low rainfall. The frequency of dust storms has been blamed on the overuse of river water, more dams, overgrazing, and deforestation.
Tragedy strikes Indonesia. 14 people are dead and more than a dozen injured after a tourist bus crashed into an advertising sign in the country's East Java province. The bus hit the pole and then overturned on a toll road. The victims were all domestic tourists returning home after a long weekend at a popular holiday destination. The driver survived and is being treated in a hospital. Police investigating the accident say neither weather nor traffic was a factor. Deadly traffic accidents are common in Indonesia, where vehicles are often old or poorly maintained and road rules are known to be ignored.
More than 70 were wounded after Israeli forces fired tear gas and rubber bullets at Palestinians throwing stones in Jerusalem's Old City. The unrest unfolded as Palestinians were attending the funeral procession of Walid as-Sharif, a Palestinian who died of wounds suffered during clashes with Israeli police last month. Al-Aqsa Mosque compound in Israeli-annexed East Jerusalem is Islam's third holiest site, which is also the holiest site for Jews, who call it the Temple Mount. Palestinians have been angered by an uptick in Jewish visits to the compound, where, by long-standing convention, Jews may go but are not allowed to pray. Clashes between Israeli police and Palestinians at Al-Aqsa in April left 300 or nearly 300 people wounded, most of them Palestinians, and killed 1 Palestinian. The violence, including in the occupied West Bank, followed a wave of attacks in Israel and raids by the Israeli military. Anti-Israeli attacks have killed at least 19 people since March 22, including an Arab Israeli police officer and 2 Ukrainians.
Hundreds of students at an elite Beijing university have protested strict COVID-19 restrictions on campus. Anger boiled over at Peking University after it tried to impose tight new movement rules, including a ban on food deliveries. Lockdown students were already confined to just one part of the campus, banned from receiving visitors, and tested daily. At least 300 students crowded outside one dormitory on the university's Wanliu campus and chanted in protest on Sunday. The students were upset that the rules for them are stricter than for instructors who also live on campus. The protest apparently worked. After the crowds were dispersed, the university agreed to make it easier for students who travel out of the campus and get grocery deliveries. Later in the news, Sri Lanka down to its last day of patrol. Extreme temperatures compound poverty in Pakistan's hottest city. Exodus of healthcare workers hits Zimbabwe. Mata ng Agila International will be right back. Stay tuned.
This portion.
Ang morning show na always nagbibigay ng ngiti at saya sa bawat kada all over the world. Tara na't ma-inspire at ma-amaze sa kwento ng mga bawat kada na nagwagi sa anumang hamon at pagsubok ng buhay. Itago na mga remote control at tumambay lang dito sa paborito niyong barkada sa umaga, ang Kada Umaga! Dahil kayo ang bida dito. Ang morning...
Good news for you. Uy, boss. Asan yung po ako? Ay, sir, kasi nag-general cleaning. Anong specialty nyo?
Ang tao na, mabuhay ng hindi regular eh. Na itatawid nila eh. Tapos ikaw, sir, ikahanap ka ba ng special?
It's a giant obstacle course. Fastest time. Pag mahulog, tuloy lang yung time. Balik mo ulit hanggang sa matapos ang course.
We're open for business, giving MSMEs the latest market trends and business opportunities.
You're still watching Mata ng Agila International. Ukraine's foreign minister urged the EU to overcome Hungary's resistance to an embargo on Russian oil and then look to kill all of Moscow's exports to starve its war machine of funds. Arguing that it would hamper its own economy, Budapest has been holding up a push by Brussels to ban Moscow's vital oil exports, the cornerstone of a planned sixth package of sanctions. Dmytro Kuleba, Ukrainian Minister of Foreign Affairs, said he is convinced the oil embargo will come. The only question is when and what will be the price that the European Union will have to pay to make it happen. He then called on the 27-nation bloc to move on to a seventh package of sanctions that would kill Russian exports and deliver a crushing blow to President Vladimir Putin's coffers. Lithuanian Foreign Minister Gabrielius Landsbergis declared that the whole union is being held hostage by one member state who cannot help them find a consensus. EU Foreign Affairs Chief Joseph Borrell said discussions to break the deadlock would go back to ambassadors after Hungary laid out the economic costs of the move.
Crisis hit Sri Lanka has run out of gas and is unable to find dollars to finance essential imports. In an address to the nation, the new prime minister said Sri Lanka has gas stocks only for a single day. He said the government was also unable to raise dollars to pay for the shipments of oil, with the ships awaiting payments before discharging their cargoes. The premier then urged people to patiently bear the next couple of months and vowed he could overcome the crisis. Sri Lanka is in the throes of its worst ever economic crisis. Its 22 million people are enduring severe hardships to secure food, fuel, and medicines while facing record inflation and lengthy power blackouts. Now the government is looking to sell off its loss-making enterprises and print more money to pay its employees.
The economy in Europe is expected to sharply decline as inflation erodes its growth predictions. The European Commission has sharply cut its Eurozone growth forecast to 2.7%. At the same time, Economy Commissioner Paolo Gentiloni says he expects inflation to peak at 6.9% in the second quarter of this year and then gradually decrease. Gentiloni blames the situation on Russia.
Russia's unprovoked invasion of Ukraine is causing untold suffering and destruction, but is also weighing in Europe's economic recovery. Last year's strong economic rebound will have a lingering positive effect on growth rates this year, but this should not detract from the impact that the war is having on our economies.
Gentiloni adds if Russia, the EU's main energy supplier, should completely cut off its oil and gas supply to Europe, the forecast would worsen considerably.
Papua New Guinea mourns the sudden death of its Deputy Prime Minister Sam Basil due to a tragic motor vehicle crash last week. Eco Hortaleza Quinola has the details.
Papua New Guinea's Deputy Prime Minister Honorable Sam Basil has died in a car accident. Member of the National Parliament representing the electorate of Wau Bulolo and Morobe, Honorable Sam Basil and his trusted police officer, First Constable Neil Mino, died in a head-on collision along Bololo-Morobe province. Policemen transported him to the nearest hospital but was pronounced dead. Police Commissioner David Manning appeals to the family of Basil and Mino to allow them to complete their investigations before releasing a concrete statement about the cause of the accident. Another vehicle is involved and the driver has been identified. They also appeal to the eyewitnesses to speak up and help the authorities. His body is presently in a local funeral home in Ley City. We acknowledge the great contributions of Honorable Sam Basil in fighting for equality and justice for the people of Papua New Guinea. Eco Hortaleza Quinola, Mata ng Agila International, Port Moresby, Papua New Guinea, trusted, connected, on point.
Thailand's economy grew 2.2% in the first quarter as exports and tourism rebounded after the relaxation of pandemic restrictions. The figures are a stark turnaround from the depths of the pandemic, which saw the economy contract by 6.1% in 2020. During the pandemic, Southeast Asia's second-largest economy suffered its worst economic performance since the 1997 Asian financial crisis, with visitor numbers crashing from roughly 40 million annually. But this month, the tourism-dependent kingdom dropped almost all restrictions for fully vaccinated visitors, including the need for COVID-19 tests to travel. National Economic and Social Development Council Secretary General Danucha Pichayanan said Thailand's export sector is good and the tourism industry is getting better due to the relaxation of entry requirements for tourists. Although testing is limited, Thailand has a weekly average of more than 6,500 daily new coronavirus infections. Danucha added that besides the COVID-19 pandemic, the global market volatility from Russia's conflict with Ukraine and a slowdown in China's economy were also factors affecting the pace of Thailand's economic recovery.
In one of the world's hottest cities, bodies are shutting down from heat stroke. Jacobabad in Pakistan is in the grip of the latest heat wave to hit South Asia, peaking at 51 degrees Celsius at the weekend. Experts say the city's searing weather is in line with projections for global warming. To make matters worse, most of the 1 million people in and around Jacobabad live in acute poverty. Water shortages and power cuts compromise their ability to beat the heat. Heat stroke can cause symptoms from lightheadedness and nausea to organ swelling, unconsciousness, and even death. Workers forced to toil in the sun are among the most vulnerable. Pakistan is the 8th most vulnerable country to extreme weather caused by climate change. This is according to the Global Climate Risk Index compiled by environmental NGO German Watch.
As a heat wave affected production, India decided to ban exports of wheat. This in turn prompted wheat prices to surge to a new record high of $453 per ton. India, the world's second largest wheat producer, said it is banning exports after its hottest March on record. According to New Delhi, factors including lower production and sharply higher global prices mean food security of its own 1.4 billion people is in peril. However, exports can also take place if it approves requests from other governments to meet their food security needs. Global wheat prices have soared on supply fears due to the conflict in Ukraine. Exacerbated by fertilizer shortages and poor harvests, the global price hike has fueled inflation globally and raised fears of famine and social unrest in poorer countries.
The help-wanted signs are out at hospitals in Zimbabwe, Africa. They're looking for nurses and nurse aides, but there are few takers for the jobs. Low salaries and poor working conditions are driving nurses out of the country. They are going overseas in droves, especially to the UK, where they can earn 10 times as much as they do at home. In the last year alone, 1,800 nurses left Zimbabwe. Under-equipped facilities only worsen morale at home. Nurse Virginia Matsamwira says she's just plain tired. She says on the amount of money she is being paid, she can't save enough for retirement.
We have been out. That's all I can say. It's tiring. The nurse patient ratio is really bad.
The U.S. Air Force carried out a successful test of its troubled hypersonic missile 1 month after announcing the program had suffered delays because of recent flight test anomalies. The air-launched rapid response weapon, or ARRW, was successfully released from a B-52H bomber off the coast of Southern California and attained hypersonic speeds. The Air Force announced that without releasing any more details about the test itself, such as the duration of the flight or its altitude. Brigadier General Heath Collins, Air Force's Program Executive Officer for Weapons, said it was a major accomplishment by the ARRW team for the weapon enterprise and the Air Force itself. The ARRW is a hypersonic weapon that uses a booster rocket to accelerate the missile to speeds in excess of Mach 5 or 5 times the speed of sound. A hypersonic glide vehicle then separates from the booster and glides at high speed toward its target. The Air Force struggled with the testing of the hypersonic missiles in the past, and the program suffered 3 flight test failures before this latest success. The Pentagon placed an increased emphasis on hypersonic weapons development after lawmakers became concerned that the U.S. was falling behind the Chinese and Russian programs. Next up, golden arches to go dark in Russia as McDonald's exits after 30 years. Scientists create algae computer-powered by photosynthesis. And let's take a look at the 75th Cannes Film Festival celebrations. When Madam Agila International returns.
Ang morning show na always nagbibigay ng ngiti at saya sa bawat kada all over the world. Tara na't ma-inspire at ma-amaze sa kwento ng mga bawat kada na nagwagi sa anumang hamon at pagsubok ng buhay. Itago na mga remote control at tumambay lang dito sa paborito niyong barkada sa umaga, ang Kada Umaga!
Ilan po ito? Sukli po, ang suyo. Ilan ba ito, sir? Sige po, sukli.
Ay! Anong ginagawa mo, ha? Ano mo ginawa to? Ha?
Ay, may pulis tayo dyan eh.
Anong pulis dyan? Ginawa mo akin to eh.
Order.
Kano kuya? Okay!
Yan, deliver!
Bigay mo lang sa kanya. Bigay mo lang, lalabas ka.
Eh wala ko alam dyan, kuya. Wala kami ng order. O pwede kong bayaran, kaya lang problema. Ayan na nga, bawas na siya. Alam ka naman bayaran ko to.
Dalawang lalaki po kasi may initiative ba kayo?
Ito kasi ang mag-aabin nyo. Nandito rin na.
December amin.
Kuya, pailan mo na siya. Nahihilo siya.
Patunogin yung ate.
Oh no! It's Biro only! Oh no! It's Biro sa Net 25!
Scientists used algae to power a low-energy computer chip for 6 months. University of Cambridge researchers sealed a colony of cyanobacteria, commonly known as blue-green algae, inside a metal enclosure the size of an AA battery. According to New Scientist, the unit was then left on a windowsill where the algae photosynthesized, generating a tiny current of electricity that powered an ARM Cortex chip. Though the system is only a proof of concept, its creators hoped algae-powered chips could be used in future Internet of Things devices. They said that their photosynthetic device doesn't run down the way a battery does because it's continually using light as the energy source. The researchers added that the advantage of using algae over traditional batteries or solar power is that it has a smaller environmental impact and it could potentially provide continuous power. The algae-powered ARM chip was used to carry out very basic calculations, during which it consumed a tiny 0.3 microwatts an hour.
Billionaire Elon Musk has said his purchase of Twitter would not go ahead unless he was given assurances on the bots that he says plague the platform. Seen by his champions as an iconoclastic genius and by his critics as an erratic megalomaniac, Musk surprised many investors in April when news that he wanted to purchase Twitter came about. But his $44 billion bid for Twitter is now temporarily on hold, pending questions over its estimates of the number of fake accounts or bots. According to CEO Parag Agrawal, internal measures show that fewer than 5% of accounts active on any given day on Twitter are spam, but that analysis can't be replicated externally due to the need to keep user data private. Musk, who has said he would make getting rid of bots a priority if he owned Twitter, responded to that tweet by Agrawal with a poo emoji. While Musk said his motivation for buying Twitter stems from a desire to ensure freedom of speech, he also wanted to boost monetization of a massively influential website that has struggled to be profitable.
McDonald's is pulling its golden arches out of Russia because of Moscow's conflict with Ukraine. The American fast food giant says doing business in Russia is not consistent with McDonald's values. Thus, it says it will sell its entire chain of restaurants in the country to a local buyer. McDonald's opened its first restaurant in Russia in 1990. In March, it closed all of 850 restaurants in Russia, throwing 62,000 people out of work. The company will take a loss of more than $1 billion to write off its investment.
Team Philippines closed its sports rally on the fourth day of the 31st SEA Games with 30 golds, 34 silvers, and 44 bronzes, holding on to the third spot in the overall medal tally. Chloe Isleta became the first Filipino swimmer to win gold in the biennial sports event since 1993 when Akiko Thompson ruled the 100-meter and 200-meter backstroke events. She clocked in 2 minutes and 18.60 seconds to dominate the women's 200-meter backstroke event. Clinton Bautista retained his men's 110-meter hurdles title after tallying a time of 13.78 seconds in the athletics competitions, while Alvin John Verhel finished in 6th place in 14.73 seconds. Jelly Dayan Paragile won the bronze medal when she finished with a time of 13.72 seconds. Another Filipina, Melissa Escoton, followed Paragile with the 4th place finish of 13.86 seconds. Meanwhile, Filipino billiard star Rubilen Amit reigned as the region's queen in the women's 9-ball pool singles event when she defeated Singapore's Tan Hui Ming 7-2 in the finals round. The super duo of Islay Erica Bomogao and Rishen Yosores clinched the Philippines' first medal in Muay Thai with a gold in the women's Waikru event. Elsewhere, the quartet of Samantha Catantan, Maxine Esteban, Wilhelmina Lozada, and Justine Tino took home the silver medal in the fencing women's foil team event. Now, according to the Philippine Sports Commission, the government is expected to shell out cash incentives for Filipino athletes who have and will deliver medals in the 31st Southeast Asian Games being hosted by Vietnam.
The last touches are being laid in Cannes for the 75th anniversary edition of the world's leading film festival, promising a return to its full glitz. Dangling from ropes above the fabled Palais des Festivals, workers are unfurling the huge poster for the Cannes Film Festival's Golden Jubilee, which features an image from The Truman Show this year. Some 35,000 film professionals are expected between May 17 and 28, hoping for a return to form for cinema's most glamorous event after 2 years of COVID dampening the mood. After Cannes was entirely canceled in 2020 and held under strict health protocols in 2021, most of the world is expected to be represented at this year's event, which includes a large industry marketplace alongside the festival. One major exception is the absence of Russians due to the impact of sanctions over the war in Ukraine and a ruling from the organizers that state-linked delegates are not welcome. China is also expected to have a limited presence due to its continuing COVID-19 restrictions. But otherwise, the festival is keen to put the pandemic in the past with no mandatory masks or health passes this year and no restrictions on partying.
Harry Styles' anticipated album, Harry's House, was praised by music critics for its abundant charm, with really well-crafted pop songs and moments of absolute beauty. Music critic Will Hodgkinson wrote, Harry's newest album is a masterclass in becoming a credible artist without alienating the hordes of formerly teenage fans who made him a pop sensation in the first place. The Guardian's Alexis Petridis described Harry's lyrics as canny, though perhaps not especially deep, but still rated the album a 4-star just so because every song feels like a single. Petridis added Styles' third album is a mature one that majors in sounds evocative of the mid-80s, naming Prince and Steely Dan as comparisons on some tracks. Meanwhile, Rolling Stone said Styles is a Mick Jagger for our more enlightened age. The highly anticipated follow-up to the pop musician's Grammy-nominated sophomore album, Fine Line, is set to arrive on Thursday.
Now let's open our eyes to stories of the past with this day's historical facts. In 1857, Pascual Poblete was born in Naik, Cavite. Dubbed as the father of Tagalog newspaper, he co-founded Diaryong Tagalog, the first bilingual newspaper in the Philippines. Poblete also wrote the Tagalog translation of Noli Me Tangere, a novel by Dr. Jose Rizal. In 1900, L. Frank Baum's The Wonderful Wizard of Oz was first published. The work became a classic of children's literature, with the 1939 film adaptation being one of the most beloved movies in American cinema. And in 1954, racial segregation in public schools was outlawed by the U.S. Supreme Court. This decision greatly motivated the civil rights movement of the 1950s and the 60s and ultimately led to the abolishment of racial segregation in all public facilities.
Now, before this broadcast ends, let us ponder on a quote from U.S. President Abraham Lincoln. Commitment is what transforms a promise into reality. Good old Abe. And that's a wrap for tonight's news. Catch the latest updates in our social media channels. I am CJ Hirro.
And I am Nina Ricci, Alagao, Flores. This is Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
This program is supported by SMC